And next up, we have a really special fireside chat. And I know many of you have been waiting for this ever since this morning. He is the Mr. Reid Hoffman, co-founder of the famous social network, LinkedIn. He is also a partner at Greylock Partners. He has not only been a very successful entrepreneur, but currently also serves as on the boards of Airbnb, Edmundo, Microsoft, and more. He has also written several books, and he will be sharing about his upcoming new book today. Interviewed by our chairman, Anis Uzzaman. So can we please give a big, warm round of applause for Reid and Anis.
Ready.
Thank you, Reid.
Great to see you.
First fireside chat of the day. And are you tired? No, right? It's just the starting. The pitch competition, which is coming from 4 o'clock, I think that is going to be very interesting. So I got here 2 very famous people. Reid Hoffman. A round of applause for Reid. Guys. So it's all about you today. It's about the startups. Okay? So I want to find out from them how they became so successful. That's all the goal is. The theme is success. Okay? So Reid actually was part of Apple in PayPal, and then you created LinkedIn. So tell me, what was the biggest success in your career?
Well, this is a kind of an obvious answer, but obviously, thus far, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Yes.
And what was the secret of the LinkedIn success?
So I think one of the things that is key for entrepreneurs is to always be learning. So I tried a startup before called SocialNet, then I went to PayPal, and part of the thing is learn from all the smart people around you. Go and pitch them the idea, ask for criticism, ask for ideas about how to do these. And that learning network, fundamental to entrepreneurship is to always be learning. And I think that's the kind of key thing that helped me with LinkedIn, because it's everything from how do you build the company, how do you get distribution, what are the right technology platforms, how to think about competition, how to think about financing, what is the way that you run a good financing process, what's the way you maximize it. And that's essentially constantly learning from the network of people around you. And it doesn't necessarily have to be entrepreneurs, it doesn't have to be VCs, angels, those are all, of course, great. But actually, in fact, anyone who's smart, who can actually help you think about your problem. And that has been, I think, most fundamental to whatever success I've achieved.
Perfect. So I'm sure that we only hear about the success all the time. Have you ever had any failures?
Well, I actually think about my first startup, SocialNet, which did sell for a return on capital. I thought of that as a failure. Among the things where I didn't understand that you need to have a unique pattern for distribution. I also learned a ton about what kinds of people do you hire into the company, because when I went to SocialNet, I had been thinking about, you get someone who has 10 years experience doing that job before, et cetera, and you populate it. Actually, in fact, in most startups, especially early stage startups, what you want is very fast learners. You need skills, you can't usually learn to be an engineer in the startup, but learning the positions was much more. And actually, funnily enough, part of the reason why PayPal had that orientation is because Peter, Max, and I were friends, and I was telling them about the things that I'd been learning about SocialNet when they started PayPal. So they started hiring essentially fast learning generalists, more than 10 to 20 years of experience in a specific vertical.
Perfect. So you're saying that even if you fail, just keep learning, right? And at some point, you will hit that success point.
Yes.
Right? So I know that there are a lot of entrepreneurs here, right? And they are building their own startups. There are 3 problems that they mainly face. I think fundraising is a big headache. Expansion is a big headache. And then the exit. And somehow you did very well in all these 3. Can you tell them the secret?
42. I guess not that many people get a little.
I heard a ripple.
Yes, exactly. Look, I think the key thing, it's the learning and the network stuff applied to each of these 3 things. So I didn't start knowing how to go pitch VCs, how to approach VCs. I didn't start knowing how to essentially grow your business, how to acquire customers, how to think about scaling the organization. And I certainly didn't start thinking about how do you get to interesting exits. And the key thing that you need to be doing is saying, this is the next thing I'm trying to learn, and who are the people I know who can essentially help me learn that? And then, for example, when you're approaching VCs or angel investors, the usual thing that's most important is to get actually a warm introduction to them. Because, for example, to my inbox at Greylock, I probably get about somewhere between 30 and 50 pitches for financing a day, just cold emailed in.
Cold emails, yeah.
It doesn't, like you just don't even have time to look at them, right? You don't even read anything because it just, then you spend all your time reading them. And so that introduction then comes from somebody that you say, oh, this person actually, in fact, knows me, knows what I'm interested in, knows the kind of what kinds of things I would focus my time on, and then I could take a look at it. And that's kind of key for that in terms of fundraising. And then as the rest of it goes, you should be constantly seeking out, usually again through referrals, but people either you know or you're referred to who can help you with insight about what to do in your business.
So guys, the keyword is referral, okay? So I'm going to come to a different area that I know that Reid, you are in Greylock right now, right? You do a lot of investment. I will come to that later. But I also wanted to know that you're doing a lot of book writing. So what inspired you to write books? I know that, do you get any time to write books? How do you do this?
It's a lot of work on weekends, as Chris can attest. So the thing that started is I gave the commencement speech at my high school, which is the Putney School in Vermont, and it was about how everyone should be the entrepreneur in their own life. And that's, one of the very few speeches that I actually write. And I circulated it around, people said it should be a book, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. And most of the advice that's given to young people is wrong. It's like, choose your career path. And those kind of career paths are going away, and it's, it's no longer what color is your parachute. It's how do you essentially be the entrepreneur of your own life. And so did that, and that's how I got into book writing, because with Ben Kesnoka. And then part of how Chris and I started writing together is we then said that, okay, this notion of having very entrepreneurial employees, something needs to be written for corporations. Mm-hmm. And so we wrote an article with Chris to send to HBR, Harvard Business Review, and they said, well, we'd love to publish the article, which they did, but we really want to publish the book. So Chris, Ben, and I sat down and we said, well, time for a book? Well, I think we could make it work. And that was probably a very efficient process. And then for blitzscaling, since Chris and I had been working together, I said, look, I think this secret of what is Silicon Valley is not being told the right way. Let's go do this. And it's been a much longer path than we expected, just because it actually took a lot of work to refine the lessons, to distill the ideas. But it started with a class at Stanford that we were doing together, and that's how we ended up doing that. And each of them is essentially an effort at saying, how do you encapsulate some information so that, a little bit like blitzscaling and whatnot, it's at scale advice of how do you give back to entrepreneurs? How do you essentially try to make more entrepreneurs with more information that will help them, run this very difficult race?
So you might be wondering what is blitzscaling. We'll come to that. I think we want them to actually explain that to us in a very easy way. But Chris and Reid, I think, wrote the first book together. The book is called Alliance. Can I put that on the screen, Alliance? So this is the book they actually wrote together, two of you together. And then what is happening in October of this year, they are coming up with the second book. Can I put that on? The blitzscaling, right? So the second book is coming up. So this is the book coming up. It's right behind you, by the way.
Yes.
And so this is the book coming up. And what is happening, guys, all of you who are attending, you're getting a free copy of the book. Okay. Yay. So what you need to do, may I? So what you need to do, you need to go back to your Eventbrite registration page and put SWC book and make sure that you put your address and now post it on the social network. Then it will get expanded, right? So put SWC book, it will actually send you a book to your home address, wherever you are. It's fine because Amazon can take care of it, right? So let's go back. Let's talk about blitzscaling, okay? Why don't we learn about it? So Reid, why don't you tell us what is blitzscaling?
So call it around 5 years ago, I was listening to some Silicon Valley people answer the question about what makes Silicon Valley special. And they were giving the same answer that was essentially given in the 90s, which is, young technical talent, technical companies, venture capital, technical universities, a culture that generally allows taking risk, a less fear of failure, more repeat, and that you just had enough shots on goal that these amazing companies resulted. And the thing that's true, as many of you know, is that this kind of startup culture is actually now very broad around the world. It's in lots of cities and lots of regions of the world. And so that doesn't explain why it is you still have such a high population of world-changing companies within this little teeny area, right? So Silicon Valley overall is about 4 million, 4.5 million people. That's not 4 million people in tech. That's 4.5 million people in the whole area. And so why is it that so much of NASDAQ and so many of these tech companies can? And so what I realized was that it was a network of talent, a network of playbook and information, a capital market that's responsive to that, an ability to plan and learn to address basically global markets very quickly. That was the reason why Silicon Valley was producing so many world-changing companies. And that was when I approached Chris and I said, look, I think this is something we should write about. I think it could be helpful to everyone in the world. And if you really kind of boiled it down, it's that the speed to scale is so important that you throw over many other things overboard in order to get there. So, for example, you might raise a lot of capital and spend it inefficiently. You might hire at such a rapidity that you're constantly changing over your organization and you have some chaos in your organization. You might experiment with different forms of customer service models in terms of like what's the way you have to provide customer service or new sales techniques as a way to get to that speed. And that speed to scale is actually, in fact, the kind of fundamental thing. And then we call it blitzscaling because of that speed to scale that's so key. And the other thing to think about it is there's 3 kinds of scale we talk about. It's user scale, revenue scale, and organizational scale. The scale chart that Chris just went through is the organizational scale. But what you find in almost all of these businesses, even if they're highly leveraged consumer internet software businesses, is that in order to make them work, you usually end up with organizational scale. Mm-hmm. Large number of members, larger organizational scale. Larger revenue, organizational scale. Salesforce, customer service, support, multi-threading in your organization for doing multiple projects at the same time. All that kind of thing. And that's the reason why the way that you build your company and the way that you change the pattern of how you operate by organizational scale is the central axis of the book.
Perfect. So I know that, I heard that Reid, you were teaching in Stanford and you're teaching blitzscaling and stuff. So when did you first start, developing this concept?
Well, so I started thinking about it, I think around 2013, 2014.
Okay.
And then I think it was early 2015, maybe it was kind of spring, that Chris and I started talking about it. Okay, let's teach this class at Stanford, because one of the ways, yes, I could write the whole book just from a LinkedIn perspective, but it wouldn't get the breadth and the differences of lessons, the differences of approach that would be really important to entrepreneurs, because you're trying to give this to entrepreneurs. And so it's like, okay, well, let's teach a class at Stanford, and we'll invite a bunch of iconic folks, Eric Schmidt, Reid Hastings, Marissa Mayer, Jeff Weiner, and we'll have them come and talk about this. Brian Chesky, you can go on, it's all on the web, so you guys can find it. And that would be the architecture of the book. And what we learned was that while these people who are superstars, who build these amazing companies, who are thoughtful, some of the most thoughtful CEOs and executives, in the business, they only had angles on the whole, here is the key concept for a new entrepreneur on how to scale. Mm-hmm. And so Chris and I looked at each other and said, okay, this book's going to be much harder to write than we had originally thought, but also therefore more valuable, and so we should do it.
Next thing is that I know that the startups are thinking that, I already have my startup, right? Mm. And this book just came out, which is not coming out until October, right, I guess?
October 9th.
October. And so when they should start blitzscaling?
So blitzscaling is sometimes a proactive choice. You need to get to a certain amount of scale for critical mass in your business. You're worried that competition will start, even though it hasn't yet. You have the natural market, like you have a time window in a market. All of those things could cause you to decide, I'm going to proactively blitzscale. A lot of times it's actually driven in this global competition, a little bit of the Glengarry, Glen Ross example that Chris used, is that it's a competitive clock where the first mover to scale, because first mover is not first mover, it's actually first mover to scale, that's what matters. The first mover to scale actually, in fact, wins a strong majority of the market, in which case that then really matters. Capital, growth, acquiring customers, and you go as fast as possible in order to do that. And so that's most often the drive, or the fear of competition is the drive, because otherwise, why spend capital inefficiently? Why not raise the minimal amount of money and then grow on revenue? Yes. Those are the reasons why, and sometimes, by the way, you can blitzscale on revenue, you just have to have a very large revenue pipe, which, there's Google and others, but it's more common that you're doing it through capital.
Just out of curiosity, can you not blitzscale and still survive?
For sure. If, for example, you have a unique market, you don't have competitors, and that you can just grow in the normal way, that's totally fine. Now, the world is heading more towards blitzscaling because it's globally connected, competition can come from anywhere, and in global connectivity, like for example, it used to be, the reason why there used to be so much retail is because you didn't have delivery to everywhere. Well, the first one that started changing that was Walmart, right? Amazon is the second one that started changing that because you had natural kind of moats around your areas of business. If you have a natural moat and you're kind of going toward, or you don't have much in the way of competition, it's much better to do the kind of the classic, MBA approach of being efficient in your capital, testing, okay, what's my customer acquisition cost? What is my real LTV? How much should I spend against that in customer acquisition cost? And being very thoughtful and deliberate about that. That is still a important set of entrepreneurial tools and a set of business tools that including blitzscaling businesses, still use. The question is, you have a global market, you've got competition to scale. Now competition can come from many, many places. Then that tends to the end result tends to be blitzscaling.
Perfect. So I think we actually heard about blitzscaling. The rest we'll find out inside the books, I guess. Yes. Right? So let's talk a little bit different topic. Let's talk about the trends, okay? So question to both of you, starting with you, Reid. What do you think is the next big thing?
So Silicon Valley is a little confused right now because there are too many interesting possibilities. So typically in Silicon Valley, it tends to go to, we get the, oh yeah, it's going to be social networking, or oh, it's going to be enterprise software, or, and there's these kind of, consumer internet. And then, oh, nothing's really happening right now, right? The challenge right now is that there's too many interesting things. So there's things like, for example, obviously artificial intelligence is going to be important for large tech companies and a number of startups. Artificial intelligence, machine learning itself is developing, and there's a whole bunch of different data sets, and it's going to transform a number of industries. Is that, okay, it's going to be AI. Well, but then there's all this stuff happening in crypto, right? And there's new crypto protocols, and there's the reinvention of certain parts of the financial system. There's where crypto can become the kind of HTTP for money and value, and then you could have a developer ecosystem on top of it. And is it going to be Bitcoin, Ethereum, new ones? What's that? Okay, there's a whole stack of that. All right, well, maybe it's just the two things. Well, then there's AR, VR, right? AR and VR are getting a lot more interesting, right? And you say, well, actually, maybe this is now the time where you actually have the virtual worlds of Snow Crash, and where actually we have entertainment there, new forms of movies, we have collaboration there, we have mixed reality in Microsoft language for how we work, with HoloLens and everything else. Okay, so maybe it's that. Continue. And so I think, and the weirdness is we don't know which of those is the first one that's actually going to really spike. And so the way that I tend to approach these things is I do look at the areas that are the current hot trends where, the number of different pitches, it's AI for, right? 10 years ago, it was, Airbnb, but for. And so you get a lot of those. You pay attention to see which ones work. And so, for example, for my investing, autonomous vehicles, Nauto, Aurora, Neuro are things that Greylock has done. But then I also look for the things that currently people think are crazy, that people think are, well, that's not, that's not yet a good idea, because that contrarian and being right is fundamental both to entrepreneurship and to investing. And so, for example, last year, I did an investment in London called Entrepreneur First, which is an incubator. And if you actually ask most Silicon Valley people, they think incubators are bad ideas. Yeah. Accelerators might be okay, but incubators are bad ideas because people have tried like 20 or 30 of them.
Yes.
And other than Y Combinator is an accelerator, none of them have really worked. But I was like, no, this is actually a unique and new approach, and it's trying to do something that other folks aren't trying to do, so Entrepreneur First, interesting. Anyway, so those are the kinds of things that that I do, and I did crypto. I invested in Zappo. Greylock invested in Coinbase. I tend to be I still think Bitcoin's really important. I haven't moved on from Bitcoin, although obviously Ethereum has interesting prospects with the ICOs and a bunch of other things. So that's a quick portrait.
So, Reid, I know that you're in Greylock, right? And so at Greylock, I'm sure that you've been there for 13 years almost?
No, I think 9.
9 years, okay.
Yeah.
So at Greylock, what kind of investments you are doing right now, and what is kind of like you're focusing? Because all of these people here are wondering how to get investment from you.
So the only way to get on my calendar and attention is get a referral from someone who knows me. It's too slaughtered. So that's for anything. That's for a meeting. That's for an investment. Anything. And whether that's generally true, that's not just me. That's generally true for VCs who are in demand, or angel investors, or other folks. Let's see. So I'll give 3 answers to the things that I look at. So one is obviously an area of zone that I know, like by my own expertise, which is like networks, marketplaces, consumer internet sites, things that kind of target scaling to hundreds of millions and billions of people, and that have a kind of a network component to them. And so that's part of the reason why, like, for example, when the Airbnb guys were pitching me, and they did get a referral to me, 2 minutes in, I was like, I want to make this investment, right? Like, I understand what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important, new change to the human ecosystem in the world. I think it could be a amazing business with a great mission and really actually help people both as hosts and as travelers. So that's one category. Second category is there are key important tech trends, some of which I pay a lot of attention to, some of which I don't. Crypto I have and done a bunch of stuff there. Specific forms of AI, autonomous vehicles, other things I've also done. And then, for example, for AR, VR, I let my partners do that, although I participate. I'm going to look at it because I kind of went, well, it looks great technology, but early to market. So I was kind of like, well, we'll see. And so that those areas of technological trend I can also be interested in. But then, as I mentioned, the thing that I tend to most be on the hunt for is the thing that amazes me and surprises me. Because when that's the case, now sometimes, like, the difference between madness and genius is you happen to be right with genius, but it's very hard to distinguish, either as an entrepreneur or as an investor at the beginning. But that edge in a portfolio where some of that ends up being like genius and amazing and new are the kind of the magical moments, and usually kind of build to amazing companies. And so those are the kinds of things I look for.
Perfect. So I know that both of you also experienced large corporation. You're sitting on the board of Microsoft right now, is that correct? So I have a lot of people here who actually work in large corporations. So a question from them, I guess, I'm going to actually say that on their behalf, is that how large corporations can be innovative, what they need to do.
So I think fundamental innovation ultimately comes from the CEO and the executive suite, which is not to say that's necessarily their ideas, but they have to give the organizational shape and cover to make that happen. Because the natural place in an organization is the organization gets very good about efficiently converting this dollar to $2, $3, $4, whatever it is, in its current business. And, and unless it's flattened or is in crisis or the business is decaying for some reason, which could be a number of them, including market conditions, then it's like the competition in the organization is, why spend that dollar on that new thing or that risky thing? Let's spend the dollar on the thing that we know, and the thing that we know that we can make $2 on.
Security.
Yes, well, but also reliability and good results and leveraging the platform and assets and brand and customers that we have, which is all completely reasonable. And so most often, unless the whole company, like for example, Jobs' return to Apple, is in crisis, what happens is the CEO with the executives need to say, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to put this over here. We're going to give it resources. We're going to protect it from the natural organizational saying, why are you giving them money? Because that's risky. You should give me money in order to do this. Because there's always competition within the organization for, I can do more, I can grow my business, I can acquire more customers, I can have our customers love us even more by adding in these features or products or services. And so that's what's fundamental. In terms of having a company. It doesn't mean that the idea came from the CEO, it doesn't mean that the idea came from the executive suite, but they have to give it the shelter in order to drive. And so my advice to people within the organization, if you think you're going to do something innovative, make sure the executive suite buys in, will commit the resources, maybe initially small, seed stage, Series A, Series B, that's fine, and will essentially give you the maneuvering room within the organization to try it.
So, but time is running out. So I wanted to ask you a very sensitive question. Okay. If you do not want to answer it, it's fine as well.
All right.
Okay. So I know that you decided to sell LinkedIn to Microsoft. Are you happy with the decision? How did it change before and after?
Happy then, happy now. Part of it was there was a very natural alignment of the missions between the organizations. So, Microsoft, obviously a huge company, important across a wide variety of industries, but fundamentally it's kind of how do you make individuals and organizations, especially organizations, productive. And LinkedIn is how do you, ultimately working towards how do you make individuals productive, but how do you also help them have the best possible careers and job opportunities and so forth. And LinkedIn was conceptualized, both of them had platform characteristics, Microsoft obviously Windows, Office, et cetera, and kind of building platform tech. LinkedIn was thinking about the network as a platform, that you have this kind of network of participation of people, and then how do you build apps that help them kind of go where this is the right job opportunity, but also this is the right thing to learn, or this is the news that I need to know today. And so there was a very natural alignment between them. And the decision, and I think we wrote about this in the blog post, should always be of being in service to the mission, right? Because in service to the mission is also for the employees, also for the shareholders. You have to have the right kinds of financial results as well. But and that has both been, was true then. It was, we spent months thinking about this, discussing, et cetera. It was not a casual decision. And then since then, it's been going quite well. Which I think there's at this point you get into public companies, and but the results were announced, last quarter for whatever it was broken out as showing that it was working out quite well.
So I think the audience also wants to know, what is the next big thing for you? Can you tell us the secret?
So look, I do a bunch of investing, and most recently in companies like Naudo and Aurora. And so I'm hopeful that these will be industry-changing companies, and expect, these are great entrepreneurs with a really interesting plan about how to make human life better. We're publishing a book in an attempt to help entrepreneurs around the world, because understand the things that we've learned in Silicon Valley. I would say personally, one of the things I've been putting a bunch of time and energy into is, I think the U.S. political system at the moment is a disaster, and that's a kind, gentle way of putting it. And actually, frankly, shaming, right? As an American, I feel like for one of the relatively rare times, I feel like I have to apologize for being an American. And so I've been putting a bunch of work into, how do we change U.S. government, right?
For the better.
For the better, yes. It's always for the better. So.
All right, guys. So my final question to you: why are you here?
Oh, well, one, you invited us. You know, that's a key thing. But also, look, so almost for sure, the bulk of interesting and good jobs in the future are going to be created by entrepreneurship everywhere, right? That is the future of prosperity in these societies. That is the way that we have meaningful work, that we have the economics that pay for all the things that we want in society. And so supporting global entrepreneurship is fundamentally important. And that kind of global approach is one of many reasons why I'm ashamed of our current White House and administration. And I think that that this kind of approach to entrepreneurship is what's important here in the US, but also important, critically everywhere in the world. And so events like this, convocations, learning, startup competitions, that is the way. And this is part of the reason why Chris and I, put a bunch of time into doing this kind of, old school project of writing a book in order to try to be helpful.
That was the end of it. And the book will be on the way in October.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.